rights because we belong to groups?
Well, as we belong to groups, the whole group can receive the value of those rights, but each of us must accept that gift of those rights individually. One good example, for instance, we are in class together and we have to read a book.
Right.
And if I read the book for you, I'm going to comprehend the book and I'm going to get the A on the test. But you have to read the book as well and you have to comprehend it. So we can't, the whole class collectively can be sitting there together, but individually we're going to have to apply. And that's the same thing. I mean, there's a responsibility.
But we are endowed by our Creator, as Jefferson wrote, with inalienable rights, and they come to us as a gift from Him through our humanity. We don't enjoy those rights because we belong to a group. We enjoy those rights because we're human beings.
And we have individual responsibility in the application and accepting of those rights.
Got it. Now I want to move on to something that didn't get much coverage in the media during Supreme Court Justice Elena Kagan's confirmation hearings in June. Justice Kagan actually admitted she does not have a view as to what natural rights are as written about by Jefferson in the Declaration of Independence. In the Declaration, our founders wrote that our rights come from our humanity, which is a gift from God. It refers to the laws of nature and nature's God when it says that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Oklahoma Senator Tom Coburn asked Justice Kagan if she believed in God-given rights. Take a listen to how she responded.
Senator Coburn, to be honest with you, I don't have a view of what are natural rights, independent of the Constitution. And my job as a justice will be to enforce and defend the Constitution and other laws of the United States.
So you wouldn't embrace what the Declaration of Independence says, that we have certain God-given inalienable rights that aren't given in the Constitution, that they're ours alone, and that the government doesn't give those to us?
Senator Coburn, I believe that the Constitution is an extraordinary document. And I'm not saying I do not believe that there are rights pre-existing the Constitution and the laws. But my job as a justice is to enforce the Constitution and the laws.
Well, I understand that. Well, I'm not talking about as a justice. I'm talking about Elena Kagan. What do you believe? Are there inalienable rights for us? Do you believe that?
Senator Coburn, I think that the question of what I believe as to what people's rights are outside the Constitution and the laws, that you should not want me to act in any way on the basis of such a belief. I
would want you to always act on the basis of the belief of what our Declaration of Independence says.
This is a woman who now has a lifetime appointment on the United States Supreme Court, and she doesn't necessarily support the Declaration of Independence. Our government exists to protect God-given rights, but the people that run the government today don't believe that. They believe that our rights come from the government. Alveda, what do you think about this? Or do our rights come from God, who created us, or do our rights come from the government?
Our rights, of course, come from God, and then government should line up. But what's so startling to me, I believe, you know, she had to go to law school, she had to study, she probably took constitutional law. I guess law school 101 would have dealt with natural law, and she has no feel for these concepts. That's amazing to me, that she's sitting in that high seat of office and has no concept.
It's the greatest document in American history, one of the greatest documents in the history of the world, the Declaration of Independence. She just apparently thinks it's Jefferson's musings rather than the law of the land and the document that got this great experiment in freedom started.
And this is so true, and it was thought about and pondered over and wrestled with the founders. And for those who think that it was just a group of men in a smoky room, no, they were working, and you know, their wives had tremendous influence in their lives, so women were involved in that process as well.
Coming up next, how progressives have been trying to recreate the civil rights movement and making a shameful mockery of it while they're at it. Back in a moment.
Paid spokesperson.
Exposure to asbestos in the workplace has made...
Dr. Alveda King, the niece of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., is with us today for our crash course on civil rights and the rights of man. Now we want to take a look at the mockery some of our leaders have recently been making of the civil rights movement in the name of rights for all.
These people, these mobs, they're trying to recreate the civil rights thing all over again. Healthcare, banking reform, housing, the presidency, everything. Watch this.
When this body was on the verge of guaranteeing equal civil rights to everyone, regardless of the color of their skin, some senators resorted to the same filibuster threats that we hear today.
I believe health care is a civil right.
The parallels between the struggle for civil rights and the fight to make quality, affordable health care accessible to all Americans are significant.
This is a Civil Rights Act for the 21st century.
This is a Civil Rights Act.
Now, this is all, that was health care, but they're doing it now. It's all civil rights down in Arizona. All of it. Why? Why? Not because it is, not because they believe it, but because it worked. It worked. But the reason why it worked is it did start at the grassroots level. It was real. These people believed in it. They weren't just trying to grab power, they believed in it. It was true. This is not. These are half-truths or out-and-out lies. But watch. I want you to watch the way they're imaging everything that is happening now as a civil rights movement. I want to show you two pictures. Come on over with me. Show you two pictures. And I don't know if, I haven't heard anybody else say this. Put the Nancy Pelosi picture up here. Okay, remember this? Okay, this is when they walk through the Tea Party crowd. Remember? And they're linked arm in arm. John Lewis. Powerful civil rights marcher. Okay? But look at them. Arrogant. Laughing. Oh, we're having a great time. Mocking the Tea Party people. That's what it was. Now, let me show you what they were recreating. Look at that scene. They were recreating this. Can you put them side by side, please? That's what they're trying to recreate. The power of an image. But let me turn the tables. Look at this face. Now look at this man. Look at him. Totally different. This woman is mocking. They're laughing it up. Look at this man. Look at this man. Look at this man. Look at this man. This one. This one. They're frightened. Look at his face. You don't think he knew he was going to die? You don't think he knew what was at stake? These people had courage. This is a civil rights mockery. It is a mockery of these people. This is why it succeeded. Look in his eyes. This is why this will fail.
Dr. King, what do you make of the juxtaposition of those two pictures that Glenn just showed?
Well, I believe as I can go back in history, and you know, I lived during the Civil Rights Movement. I marched, I went to jail. I know what my uncle and all of those, my dad, Reverend A.D. King, those pictures in that picture, right. You know, I knew what they stood for. And now when I see Speaker Pelosi with African Americans gathered around her, and they're really trying to tear down the dream, to destroy the American dream of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for one family, one human family, I think it's a travesty. And I just ask America, I beg America, please don't be moved by your emotions when you see a group of people in what appears to be a civil rights effort.
Right.
Look into the history and see what they're really saying.
Next, the African Americans who preceded the civil rights leaders of the 1960s by a century or two.
It's not a good idea to raise taxes. Oil and gas industry, it'll kill jobs faster than anything you could do.
This would really hurt our economy.
Taxes and energy companies is a terrible idea.
Energy is how we operate our lives. We heat our homes, drive cars. Those are the things that we use to keep us comfortable, keep us moving.
I don't think they need to raise taxes.
What you're going to have is just a longer, deeper recession.
These will kill jobs.
This is certainly not the time to raise taxes. Some people are just barely holding on.
When you look in the mirror, can you imagine erasing years?
Welcome back to the fifth and final installment of Glenn Beck's Crash Course program. We're talking about civil rights this hour, and I'm joined by Dr. Alveda King, niece of Dr. Martin Luther King and pastoral associate at Priests for Life. We want to turn now to some of the black founding fathers who preceded the civil rights leaders of the 1960s.
For some reason in American history, we think that the only time blacks stood up for their rights was when Martin Luther King decided to leave the pulpit and hit the stump, hit the stump to make speeches. The bottom line is, for the longest time, we've adopted this victim narrative about blacks in the United States, that the only role they played was a victim to white majority oppression. When I teach my course on Black American politics, I always stress to my students that when we talk about King and the civil rights movement in the 50s and 60s, we need to call it the modern civil rights movement, because blacks from before the revolution were prudently pressing for their rights. American history could be described as one long civil rights struggle. Our first Emancipation Proclamation, Declaration of Independence.
That's right. It's been this way. It's going on now. It's going on. It's people trying to grab others' rights, and that never changes. That's human history. That's human history. If I ask the audience, when did America have its first African American judge? What year would you say? Anybody? Take a guess. Judge. 1860s? Anybody? 1770. Amy, is that just a wild guess?
No, not. I wasn't sure exactly, but I think it's about
1770. Tell me.
1768. Wentworth Cheswell, New Hampshire, elected to office in New Hampshire. He was reelected for the next 49 years, held 8 different political positions. Really cool story about him is we all know that Paul Revere made his midnight ride. We also know he wasn't the only guy riding that night. Another guy riding, Wentworth Cheswell, black and white riding.
Now, how is it possible? Did you know that we had an African American ride to say the British are coming, the British are coming? Amy did. Amy did. Anybody else besides Amy know that? 2, 3. Okay, 3 people in the audience.
He was such a great guy, and we never hear about him because he rode north and Paul Revere rode west. And Revere was going after Reverend Jonas Clark's church because that's where Hancock and Adams were, was him. And that's where we had blacks and whites, as you pointed out, laying on the ground after that battle. Wentworth Cheswell rode north telling people the British are coming. And it was from the north that all those people came to Boston to take on the British at Bunker Hill and everywhere else. So we don't hear about his ride because the British went west, and that's where all the action happened. But it was a couple of days later when all these people started coming down from New Hampshire and Vermont and elsewhere, and that's where he had ridden, telling them what was up. James Armistead, we talked about the first double spy, really cool guy. This is Richard Allen. He's the first founder of a black denomination in America. He is a soldier in the American Revolution. He actually is the first guy to practice medicine, taught by signer of the Declaration, Dr. Benjamin Rush. Just a really cool story.
Okay.
So really cool.
All right, good. Now tell me.
Here to these guys.
Now let's take the full of the first representatives. I asked, when did we have our first black Speaker of the House? When did we have the first Speaker of the House? 1789. When did we have our first black Speaker of the House? I bet most people would say never.
Never, except it was right here. Joseph Hayne Rainey. Joseph Hayne Rainey of South Carolina is the first black to preside over the House of Representatives. These are the first 7 blacks elected to Congress. You have here Senator Hiram Rhodes Revels, the first black U.S. Senator elected. He was a minister of the gospel. He was a missionary. He worked with Frederick Douglass. He recruited 3 regiments of black soldiers in the Civil War, and he was a missionary to slaves in the South. You have here Benjamin Turner, Josiah Wall, DeLarge. This guy right here is really cool. Robert Brown Elliott is probably the most brilliant guy of that era. He actually took on the vice president of the Confederacy in a debate on the floor and just tore his head off. The racist Alexander Stephens. It was a great debate.
When did we turn? Were these guys proud Americans, or did they say
this is the epitome of what we were just talking about. These were individual guys. Half of these guys taught themselves to read. Half of these guys were slaves, and 5 years later, they're sitting in Congress. And as slaves, it was a capital offense to learn to read. So these guys in 5 years, and I'll guarantee you read their speeches and records of Congress, you better have a dictionary and a thesaurus in both hands because you want to understand the language they use. It is so brilliant.